Have you ever had to copy a finish of an old, really nice, aged antique that might have had a color something like this, not knowing how to start? Well, I'm gonna do that tonight. I gotta figure something out. Maybe you can watch along and we'll even answer a few questions. Stick around. All right, welcome to the shop. It's so good to have you here. We're gonna dive into this, trying to recreate an antique finish, an old finish. Now, it's a very particular finish that I'm trying to do, and if you read the description for this presentation, I am in the process of getting the final stages finished, reproducing a Canterbury Shaker rocker. I first visited the Shaker Village to find an item to copy. I wasn't even sure if it was going to be a chair. And I walked around with the curator there. They were nice enough to say they were open to that. While walking around, I looked off into one room and I saw what you see in this photo. I stopped and I took a photo. I said, that's it. We're making that chair. It looks so great there. Maybe it was the afternoon light coming in the window, but the color of it, the kind of the stature of it, it has a classic look. It's very unique to Canterbury, the way some of those details are on that rocker. Now, one of the great things about it was I got to actually bring it home to the shop. They were very kind to loan it to me to make careful drawings. And when having it here, I treated it like it was a treasure. It's close to 200 years old, but the color was so great. It's either a maple or birch, but just the way they maple and birch age and mellow, it's hard to tell them apart. So I laid it down right on the drawing paper, and I was able to trace it with a special gadget that got the perfect outline of it. And the thing that I hadn't really explored yet is the finish. I want to think ahead of how to finish this chair. You can see that kind of warm, it's got like an amber brown color, and it also has like these little reddish kind of orange tones over the top. So it's this complex color, and it's complex because it's old. You can see how the finish is kind of alligatored there. But if you notice, the bumps are darker in color, and you have this lighter underfield. I don't know if you can see that, but the way you can actually see the wood, where it appears the finish is raised away from, it is a little more amber or golden yellow, and then you have the browns and that kind of orangey red highlight. So it's a complex kind of color, but it's a hard one in a way to reproduce. But I wanted not to just slap on something. It's not a one-step finish. Really great finishing. It happens in a layered approach. You don't try to get it all on one step. I'm gonna try to approximate that finish or work toward it using a piece of maple. Now this is soft maple, but it'll finish very similarly to the hard maple. So I'm not worried about that. The approach will be the same. I'll be playing around with it. Now, I wish I had the chair still here. It'd be so much easier to like hold it up next to it and really compare how it's looking, but I don't. So what I'm gonna do is work on the color. Now let's just start with a couple browns. I'm gonna be using what I call aniline dye stains, if you're not familiar with them. They come in a powder form. They're like, this is one from J.E. Moser's. You just dissolve it in water. I usually take little containers like this. So I'll take a quarter teaspoon usually, level it off of whatever aniline dye I'm using. And of course it has to be water soluble for this. And I'll put it in there, then just go get the hot tap water going. It's not really important. I haven't found to be distilled or anything like that, but I'll just fill it up with and stir it up, and the hot water helps it dissolve faster, and it'll work great. So I fill this right up close to the top, and that being a 1/4 ounce to 4 ounces, it equates to what 1 teaspoon per 16 ounces. Okay, that's a good vibrant mix. Sometimes I'll cut that in half teaspoon to 16 ounces in whatever volume ratio. And then I'll apply 2 coats. It gives you a little lighter, more control if you like. I'm just gonna go with the full 1 teaspoon, 16 ounces on this. And if we have to cut back, I'll do that in the future, all right? So I mixed up some. I've got also some medium yellow maple. So that's gonna give us our nice amber color. It's yellow, but it's not bright yellow. And then I also have a russet amber maple. It's sort of a brown russet, brownish red. The people who come up with the names of these things, it's like the paint companies, right? I don't know, but that's what it's called in the J.E. Moser's brand. If you're interested, it's W1470 russet amber maple, water soluble. Okay. Now, the solubility is important because they also make alcohol soluble, which has to be dissolved in denatured alcohol. And then there's also oil soluble, which usually you'll dissolve it in thinner, like paint thinner, and then mix that little bit of thinner or whatever into your finish. So you might have some type of varnish or whatever. But we're gonna focus on the water soluble. It's very simple to use, and it gives you really beautiful colors. I've got these jars are mixed up. I've got the standard brown and the russet maple here, and let's take a look at that first. We're gonna put a little color right on the wood. I just wanna show you the browns first. If you notice that right on the wood, when I had the chair, I could see the background color or the overall background tone of this thing was yellow. I don't know if you ever watched any of those painting shows and the artists will just make these broad sweeping brushes strokes and just hit the whole canvas with some color. And you go, oh my gosh, why did it's like, it might be all yellow, it might be all like a black, and you're thinking, why are they doing that? It's messing it up. But then they start putting colors on top of it. And by the end of it, you hardly even see that initial color because everything has gone almost completely over it. But it's there, it's just kind of in the background. So that's how I think this yellow is. But let me just show you what these look like going on. Now, when they look wet, that's the color they're gonna be. All right, this is the russet maple. So you can see it's got like a brownish, reddish, little, almost like a rusty brown, reddish tone. Not a lot of amber to it, right?
It's nice.
Yeah, it's nice, but not too exciting. So that's what you were thinking, right, russet?
That's the goal, right?
Yeah. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's not the russet. That's the standard brown. I was wondering, that looked very brown.
Still looks like a potato.
That's why it's looking brown. All right, so that's the standard brown, okay? The russet is a little redder and more mapley. Here we go. Okay, see this is looking redder. See how that's almost too red. Can you see that color
Peachy.
well?
Looks kind of peachish.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Now, it's hard to read the colors, but so that's the color it's going to be when the finish is on. But what happens with these aniline dyes, and this can fool you, once it starts to dry, it gets flat and it transforms. When it's dry and no coating on top yet, it looks weird. And you might think, oh, that's not the color I wanted. Well, that's not it. It's this color right here while it's still wet. Okay? Now, the last one I want to show you is the maple.
Bobby says that W.D. Lockwood sells the J.E. Moser dyes.
Oh, good. Yeah, Lockwood is another one. They're a great aniline dye company as well. This is the medium yellow maple. So, whoops. So look at that's pretty cool, right? But it's pretty bright yellow. But it has a nice warm antique color. But none of those colors on their own are really gonna do it. And maybe there's the perfect color, but what I have found is, just as I was saying earlier, that I usually sneak up on it by layering it. And I'll do tests like this on pieces of wood to try to feel my way. Now, as I said, the yellow is our background. It's going to be the best for the background. So we're going to start and just apply yellow on the whole thing. So I would just cover this whole thing and just hit it. This is a sample, so I'm not really applying it in the best way. I would have a little larger rag usually. You can brush it, but I usually dip a rag into a small bucket or squeeze it out mostly and then wipe it on. So there you go. That looks pretty nice, right? But it's too yellow. It's not complex at all. So let's take, I would go ahead and start and just treat the whole thing like this. Just try that, right? Okay. Now I've got one I already did that with, and I let it dry. And this is, so see how different it is after it's dried? This one's still a little wet. See that? Mm. So it looks way more faded and light after it's dried a little. So this has the grain raised a little bit on this. I did raise the grain and knocked it off a little earlier, but I'm going to take some 320 and very lightly hit this, which will take a tiny bit of the color off, but that's okay. Okay, so now I've got my medium. Now let's try, this is our standard brown. Let's see what that looks like over the top. So this is that layering thing. We're artists now. I remember mentioned this before, I think, that in the biographies of Leonardo da Vinci, they've discovered that one of his great techniques was to use multiple layers to get those very subtle iridescent kind of in the depth to like the skin and all that, to like the Mona Lisa, So that's what we're trying to do here. All right. So now there we go. That's just a standard brown over the medium yellow. And it doesn't have to be these exact colors. These are just what I had, and they're pretty reliable. Now I'm going to go with the russet. And, given how that looked, I kind of like how that was looking, because the yellow is kicking down the red a little bit, and it just feels more like the chair. Now, I might decide that I want to go with the brown, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of leaning more toward this being more in the field. The chair just has a little more red in it. So just as an experiment, I went ahead and I treated one whole board here. This has the medium yellow maple and then the russet amber maple, okay, on there. Now, once I've got the color tone, the base, the way I want it, now I'm going to add shellac. So I'm not done coloring it. This is kind of the base tone, okay? I'm just trying to establish that what I see is the base tone behind the shellac, or whatever, That shellac that's on that chair, it's got some amber in it. It's got a little orangey to it. Let's just brush on a little bit of amber shellac. So I'm just going to very lightly sand back again, each time you feel less and less of the fuzz, and I don't want to cut through and make white spots or anything. But what I'm going to use is some wax-free orange shellac. It doesn't have to be wax-free. It could be regular if you're going to just go with shellac the whole way. But I just happen to have this mixed up. And this is also from Wood Finishing Enterprises. It's de-waxed orange shellac, the Indian-made version when you look on their site. So it has, what I like about it is it's, let me just, I guess if I put it down there you can see it, or right on the, you can kind of see the color of it. It's got orange, but it has that little reddish tint to it as well. Sort of like what I see in the chair, you know, on those little pearly beads. It has that in that clumpy area. So I'm going to use this. And so we'll just brush on a coat and see. So it's going to change it a little bit more even.
So Tom Lupe says, recognizing you're using aniline dyes dissolved in water, which raises the grain, is there any merit in using an alcohol-based dye instead that would not raise the grain?
Yeah, Lupe, there are times when I will use that. However, there's kind of like a problem when you top coat alcohol stains with alcohol-based finishes. So if you go right over that, I'm just going to put a little more on there while I'm talking here. I have used this, and I've heard people say this too, that when going over the top of whatever stain, you want to have each coat be a different soluble kind of material. Now, that's not always the case. You know, sometimes when you use an oil-based stain, you're going to put a varnish on. It always warns you to make sure you've let that stain dry for 24 hours, because you start putting on your top coat and you know how it remelts the stain and you start pushing around color and it starts smearing and messing up. It's not quite the same with alcohol, but what I've noticed, it gets a mottled look. The alcohol gets weird. It does affect the alcohol-based stain. So I always try to use like a different. So I'm going to go with water. Now I'm using the alcohol, zero problems, and I'm getting a nice looking color. That actually is getting close, right? I wish I had the chair here because it's going to have, there's a lot of variation in that chair because it's old, but I may want a little brownish on top of that. So I could go with more shellac and tone the shellac. This is where it's very helpful. Like I could say, all right, that was my base coat of shellac. I like the color. Now I want to adjust it a little more to get more like this antique looking piece. So
What was the cut of the shellac that you just used? Did you discuss that?
I use 1.5 pounds.
Pound and a half.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm right around 1.5 pounds too when I'm doing this kind of thing, right? Okay. So, where was I? If you're going to go with another coat of shellac now, you have another opportunity to push the color one way or the other to adjust, like little micro adjustments, right? So if you saw, oh, that needs a little more brown. Well, you could simply use a brown kind of based trans tint or, you know, concentrated dye. And these are from this other field of dye stains. They're actually like aerosols. They're these metallic colors. So you can see when they dry on the top, they almost reflect. I don't think you can see it. I wet it again. But you'll see like this shimmering metallic almost reflection. What's great about these is they're soluble in alcohol, lacquer thinner, and water, but not oil-based finishes. They're hard, so they don't dissolve in the oil. But they're very compatible with water and alcohol, so you can dissolve them into the alcohol and you'd be good to go. The other thing about them is they're very color fast. So that's an issue with some of these aniline dyes, like water-based stains will fade if you get them in the sun. They don't hold up really well. Some of them colors even worse than others. But if you don't get them right by a window in the sun, they'll be fine for a long time. But I'm using it kind of as a base. It's not even going to hardly get exposure. But this will give you a little tonal quality. So you can push the color translucently. You know, it's clear, it's a dye, and you can just add it to your finish. So let me just show you. I'm going to just show you what these things look like. If I wanted to do it, I could put a little, I like dissolving it in alcohol, just a touch of alcohol first, and then adding it to the shellac. That way, you know, it just helps it blend in faster. So here's the yellow. I have two colors. I have a honey amber. If I needed more amber, which I don't, let's just put one drop in there. Can you see in there? See that? So that's pretty strong color, right? But this could be added to your shellac to add a little amber. Now there is a brand, I'm not sure in trans tint what the color is, but there's a brand of these trans tints called Color FX. The letter F and the letter X, okay, Color FX. And they used to be made by Wood Finishing Supplies, I think. But I think they must have gone out of business. Now they're sold primarily by a company up in Canada, so you have to pay a lot for shipping, unless you're our friends in Canada.
That's right.
But they have one that's called Orange Shellac. And what's great about that is you could have like wax-free seal coat, you know, that very light blonde shellac. But let's say you wanted the orange, you wanted more amber. You could add that orange shellac, which I had for years, and it was great because you could change your clear finish to orange shellac with just a few drops. You have to figure out. Here's one other I'll just show you real quick. This is burnt umber. It's actually a very dark brown. Whoops. It's not the best burnt umber, but you can see it's a brown. So if I needed to push this a little brown, I could add some of this to my shellac, and I'm usually spraying it, but you could brush it on. It'd be fine to brush it on because it would give it a little, in this case, it would give you maybe a little mottled streakiness, you know, which looks like that old one. So I'm not going to put that on, but I just want you to see that step where you can push it a little bit. Lastly, here's one that's dried a little bit longer that has the same shellac on it. You can use glazing stains. For this chair, I'm probably not going to because I don't really want to put it on there, but let's just see what that looks like as the last application. So this only has one coat of shellac. It's got the same thing I just showed you. But really, I think it has a pretty rich look to it. It does have a nice quality, like an antique-y warmth look. And it has that, it's not really achievable in one step, like I was saying. You have to kind of layer it up like we were doing to get these more complex, more beautiful finishes, especially when you're trying to copy an older finish that's going to have a lot of character to it. But let me just show you this lastly. This is if you wanted to add more red brown and get more complexity, and then you're going to seal this in with shellac. So this is my old trusty Mohawk burnt umber. And this is a glazing stain, and this goes on top of a sealed surface. So this has the sealed surface of the shellac, and just let it on there. It doesn't really dry right now. You can give it a couple minutes, but we don't need to because you end up wiping most of it off. This always looks really good on turned pieces but look I'm going to rub most of it off, but I want you to see how this changes things. It gives it a really beautiful tone in a overall push into the, a little more red. So if I had that chair here with this combination of possibly using glazing stains, these come in different colors. You can also mix pigments into them or mix them together. Like Van Dyke Brown is a browner, darker. I've gotten by a lot with just burnt umber and Van Dyke Brown. because that'll be a little browner, not as much red. You can add a little Van Dyke brown if you want to go a little browner. And then you're going to hit it with your finishing coats of shellac. And there, again, with the amber or clear shellac or trans tints, you can push the shellac and make those little adjustments and just sneak up on that classic, excellent antique finish. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of a crash course.
So Tom, what do you think were the bumps on the finish when we showed the up close image of the shaker rocker? What do you think caused those bumps?
That's a sign of an aged finish. They call that an alligatored finish. It just occurs, I forget about why that is. Just with age, it's from the finish like drying up a bit. I believe it's a shellac finish, or it could be a type of varnish. But when I had it here, it looked a lot like a shellac varnish. So, I don't know.
So Danny's curious, to limit the impact of the stain darkening end grain, would you shellac the end grain first?
Yeah, that's a good point, Dana. If you don't want it to absorb in the end grain, yeah, you could. That essentially is like a sizing sealer. If you sand the end grain hard, it helps minimize absorption, but it still does look darker. So yeah, that's what I would do. And you can thin that. You could thin like the alcohol, shellac to like a 1 pound cut and just hit the end grain. I've done that on pieces where I've just taken a rag and wiped it on the end grain of a table. And then when you put the varnish on, the shellac is gonna look darker. So you can use, and you won't get it absorbing the same rate.
I know, folks, you got lots of questions, so I'm just gonna go with what feels in order that's appropriate. Mike says, then after the glaze stain, you would seal it again with clear shellac, correct?
Yes, or, a tone color if I needed to still push it some direction. But if I liked what I had, yeah, I could just go right over it with clear. But that has a pigment in it, and to me, it starts to hide a little bit the grain. It looks great still. It's not like a lot is on there, but it starts to give the chair an overall tone. It looks fine, but what you can do too, I hadn't mentioned, on like a chair like this, an old chair, if we look back at those photos, maybe if you go back and watch the video, you're gonna see some areas are lighter and darker just from age, from hand stuff. The glaze can be used judiciously in around certain places and kind of blended to nothing in other areas. And you get this more kind of three-dimensional effect and realism look when you use glazes in that way too, working on antique pieces. Okay.
Okay, this is a different Mike. He's got a two-part question. I think they're related, but I'm going to give them both to you, okay?
Okay.
Does varnish work well on tiger maple, making the curl pop?
Oh, great question, Mike. We actually have done videos on that where I have shown that. Like, yes, that's the key to making figured grain like that pop is, think of it like the rolling hills. It's a rolling grain. That's why you're seeing the waves. And so you're seeing like end grainish wood, and then you're seeing side grain and then away. That's why it looks like that. It's so the finish saturating into the grain is just like end grain. It's going to read darker. So you want that. You want a penetrating stain or a oil varnish that's going to soak in a bit. So you wouldn't want to seal it right away with shellac. You could. It'll still look figured, but you won't get the really nice chatoyance that you get with a penetrating oil finish. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then he said, can you use varnish over water-soluble aniline dye? He said he's read many different opinions on that.
Oh, yeah, I know you can. Yeah, it works great. Water soluble. See, this is where you have two different solvents on top of each other. So the water, once that evaporates off, you're going to put on, if you use like an oil varnish, you'll be fine. You might be thinking if it's a water-based finish, then you might have some issues. So that's where I haven't used a lot of water-based top coats, but if you have a water-based stain, and then you go with a water-based top coat, you are kind of moving that stain around a little bit. It could have some effect. So usually, as in Lupe's question, I would alternate.
Okay. David's asking, do figured woods act badly to the layer colors due to grain irregularities?
No, not at all. No, if that first coat is saturating in, you want to pop the figure. What I'm doing with these varying coats on top is trying to just adjust color a bit. So this particular project, I'm dealing with maple, which is not highly figured unless I had a curly maple chair. So I'm not thinking as much about the grain as getting the color tone to match this antique. But absolutely, you will still see the high figure and all that. But if you really want to see, if you're concerned about making figure pop maximally, this video that we've linked to is really good. It talks a lot about actually starting, this one started with black aniline dye stain over the whole thing, and then sanded it and lightened up the surface, and it stayed in the kind of rolling grain there. And then it went with two other colors, and I believe it went with an orange and then a red. And, so you're getting that complexity of layering. And what's interesting about that too is that each one of those dye stains were a different solvent, one after the other. That's just how they do it. This was copied from an approach that PRS Guitars uses. They have some really beautiful finishes. So it was fun to see how other people do it.
Okay, Nathan says, I am repairing and refinishing an old footstool my grandfather made in 1936. How do I go about either cleaning the finish or determining what type of finish was on it?
Oh, that's a great question. 1936. That's more than likely that is a shellac or some type of varnish. But the way you can check is I usually just take like a little Q-tip and go to an inconspicuous spot, like maybe on the inside, and take a little denatured alcohol or alcohol, rubbing alcohol too works too. You're gonna dip the Q-tip in and just rub on that inconspicuous spot. And if you start lifting the finish right off, like it'll just take a few seconds, and you soften that, you got a shellac finish. So if it was lacquer, it wouldn't soften as fast. But lacquers really didn't come in until wartime. They didn't get invented until World War II. So if it's that early, it's more than likely going to be shellac or some type of varnish. But if it's shellac, you're in luck because that's easier to remove a little bit. But if it's old, maybe you don't want to remove it all. I don't know. Oh, you asked how to get it off. Honestly, I've used a lot of different things to get it off. There's nothing as good as the strong paint removers, but I think they've even limited the power of those now, so they're not like they used to be. So I would use the strongest I could find, or you can actually use denatured alcohol and get it off, but it takes a long time to soften up and remove all the shellac. So I would just use a paint stripper type thing. And after you're done, you're gonna gently remove it. You give it a wash down with mineral spirits, and then you'll lightly sand it. And you're still gonna have a lot of the rich color in there. It's gonna look great. And my advice would be, you could, in an inconspicuous spot, you could put whatever you want on it, but if it was shellac, it probably should go back to shellac. It's such a nice old finish.
Comments on polymerized shellac?
I think you mean polymerized tung oil. The polymerized is a process of heating the varnish or to make it cure better that's particularly used with tung oils. I love them, and the best ones I found now are Sutherland Wells. I love it. It's really a beautiful finish, and it goes on easily, and it's very moisture resistant. It rubs out beautifully. It's not quite as hard as the urethanes, and that's why it rubs out so nice. So if you want more durability, that little extra hardness, they also have, Sutherland Wells will add some urethane to the tung oil, polymerized tung oil varnish. You get the best of both worlds. I mean, it's not quite as luxurious. They are beautiful finishes. You're getting into this the Murdoch line, and they have this called the hard oil finishes that are polymerized tung oil and urethane. Really nice.
Okay, I think this will be the last question for
Okay.
you, sir. Using Danish oil takes a long time to dry. Do you have any solutions for a quicker dryer time? He says he uses walrus oil, Danish oil.
Oh, I haven't used that one, but yeah, there's an additive that some people maybe aren't big keen on, but called Japan Dryer. I have some downstairs, and it's really great. And if you add the appropriate amount that it says on the can, it helps the finish to oxidize faster. So those types of oil-based finishes with the Japan Dryer, get that, you add a little amount. And of course, the conditions are really key too. If it's very humid, it's going to take longer. But using that Japan Dryer has been great for me. And it'll even revive like finishes that are on the fence. Like you're not sure if they're still good, if they're going to cure really well. I would add a little Japan Dryer just to make sure. Be careful though, because it does actually enhance the combustibility of it as well. So you know that when you store your rags and you could have spontaneous combustion, all the warnings about that. Well, you want to just be sure you take care of that, because it does actually boost that a little bit, because you're increasing the oxidation process, which is builds heat. So anyway, yeah, that'll save you.
Good warning.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out. I really enjoyed that and the questions. I hope you gained something from that little experience. And remember, we've got a ton of classes over there at epicwoodworking.com and the mailing list to stay up. We're going to have some great announcements about this project, this chair. It'll be fun to track and see who buys it and what it goes for. Who knows? But we'll keep you up on that as well. And remember, if you like this content, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing, and tell your friends. Hey, thanks again for hanging out with us tonight. Really enjoyed it. Yes. On behalf of the camera lady and myself, look forward to seeing you next time, right back here on Shop Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.
I just thought of you for a second there, wondering if I was going to yell.